beating Wonderlands with only melee weapons failed to inflict my desired level of pain and trauma to myself, I decided to attempt to beat the game with only white spells and no skill points, and man, my ass hurts. Before I tell you about the over 40-hour torture I endured, we need some rules. The first rule is I can only use white rarity spells, so I can't use any guns or melee weapons. The second rule is I can't use any skill points or hero points. Beating the game with only white spells probably would have been difficult enough, but I hate myself. The third rule is I can't use any action skills apart from ambidextrous because that's not really an action skill, it's just a second spell slot. And finally, the game must be beaten on the hardest difficulty because I'm not a pussy and I'm here to suffer. Before beginning my crusade, I had to create a character, and you better get your tissues ready because few can resist rubbing one out, to forklift certified cat girl. She's a failed monk and aspiring OnlyFans content creator whose main goal is to rescue the Wonderlands from the Dragon Lord in hopes it will give her some exposure for her OnlyFans. When the game starts out, you don't get a spell for a little while, so while fighting my way through the village, I just used my bare fists. When I eventually got my first spell, I quickly realised that this was really gonna suck ass. White spells don't do that much damage, but that is not the issue. The issue is that they have a pretty long cooldown, which I can't reduce with any skill points. I slowly fought my way through the skeletons until I caught Ribula in 4K trying to bring back the Dragon Lord. I don't mean to flex, but I did take this man out first try. I know that Shroud won Gamer of the Year this year, but next year, just keep in mind that I did beat Ribula first try. Despite my impressive feat, the Dragon Lord was freed anyway, probably because it took me forever. But due to my pro level gaming skills, the Dragon Lord was too scared to face me, so I had to make my way to Brighthoof to let everybody know that he was free. The Dragon Lord had already sent his skeletons to start attacking the city, so I spent the next hour jumping around, hiding behind stuff, and occasionally killing skeletons with spells when they weren't on cooldown. It was exhilarating. I teamed up with Paladin Mike to take out the skeletons that were attacking the city gates, and I believe Paladin Mike to be on drugs because he said that I was a good fighter even though I was either dead or standing around doing nothing waiting for my spells to cool down most of the time we were fighting together. I became slightly more useful once inside the city, major emphasis on slightly, and by some miracle we were able to clear out the skeletons from the city before dying of old age. I met the queen, who was a horse, so I couldn't understand anything that she said, but I can only assume that she was so impressed by me that she was proposing a sexual relationship between the two of us, which I declined because she is a horse, and I was too busy with saving the world. I headed to Shattergrave Barrow to retrieve the Sword of Souls, and was challenged by this zombie who was also there for the Sword of Souls. I killed her, but she was a persistent wee bugger and kept taking over new bodies to try to murder me with, which was really annoying because she had a lot of health and it took me forever to kill her. Eventually, she became a boss, which wasn't very difficult, and at this point, although this had been extremely slow, I had been playing for over 3 hours at this point, nothing was actually difficult, so I was blissfully unaware that later in the game, my asshole was about to take a resizing, the likes of which I had never experienced before. After killing Zomboss, I retrieved the Sword of Souls, and she continued to shit-talk me even after I had suplexed her. So I decided the best course of action was to suck her into the Sword of Souls so she can spend the rest of eternity thinking about how dog shit she is. When I returned to Brighthoof, we partied like Boris Johnson during lockdown, and I was almost anointed a knight, but the Dragon Lord hacked off the Queen's head before we could finish the ceremony, which was a major dick move. With the Dragon Lord now possessing the Sword of Souls, he planned on sucking up the souls of everyone in the Wonderlands, which is bad. So it was up to me for some reason to go and kill his ass. I built myself a shitty wooden raft, which I was gonna use to sail across the ocean to get to the Dragon Lord. I was warned that if I didn't get this ship blessed by a bard, that I would die a horrible death at sea, which actually sounded better than going through this game with the white spells. So I sailed off and my ship was quickly pulled down to the depths, killing me, but unfortunately, I respawned. So, finding the bard it is. I headed to the Weep Wild Dankness, and it was here I discovered what would soon become the bane of my existence. Stuff that regenerates health. Because of spell cooldowns and my lack of damage, anything that regenerates health and shield is almost impossible to kill, and there is so much of it in this game. I found the bard, and we set out on a quest to save the forest through music and murder. I was about 9 hours into the game, and at this point I was starting to die more often. You're probably wondering why I'm not dual wielding spells, because I had unlocked the ability to do so by now. Well, for some reason I was convinced that you don't unlock that ability until level 18 when you actually unlock it at level 9, so yeah, I was just suffering because of my own stupidity. Once me and the bard destroyed all the forest crystals, it was time for me to face my old nemesis, the Banshee. Since I could keep my distance from her this time, she actually wasn't that much of an issue. The only problem I had was my spells were complete and utter garbage, and they would just keep targeting the skulls instead of the Banshee, which caused this fight to go on a lot longer than it should have. After 40 minutes, which was all the one attempt, I killed the Banshee and rescued the Fairy Punch Father, who fixed the bard's loot because he had been using it as a weapon instead of using it to play music. We headed back to Brighthoof where we jammed the fuck out on the docks. Then one thing led to another, and Tog decided the logical next step was to blow up the ocean instead of blessing my ship. With the ocean now gone, I was gonna have to make my journey on foot instead of by boat, which isn't great, since the Dragon Lord is sucking up people's souls with every passing moment. But Tog is happy with his accomplishment, so at least there's that. I unlocked my secondary class, and I went with the Stablemancer so that I could have a higher critical hit chance. And this is the moment I discovered that I could have been dual wielding spells the entire 3 hours that I was in the forest. My quest to save the Wonderlands from the Dragon Lord was quickly put on hold when I met Bones, who needed my help to sort out his relationship troubles. And I know people were dying, having their souls sucked out, but I couldn't just turn my back on true love. While collecting the parts of Bonesy's bird Polly, I was viciously assaulted over and over again by the sea life that has somehow quickly adapted to the lack of water. I put Polly back together, and she led me to Bones' crew, who I bullied by spilling their drinks, telling them I fucked their mum, and beating the shit out of them. This caused them to gain a massive amount of respect for me, and they agreed to help us fight Bones' lover, LeChance. I got the rest of the crew to join us by destroying LeChance's ship and killing a bunch of new recruits in cold blood. But it's probably for the best that they're dead, because if they couldn't beat me with my shitty spells, they were clearly useless. With the crew back together, we headed down to meet LeChance and get Bones' ship back. The crew turned out to be useless, as they all just stood there and watched me fight LeChance's crew on my own. Which wasn't too hard since they were skeletons, which is the easiest enemy type, but they're still a bunch of asswipes for abandoning me like that. I passed away peacefully multiple times at the hands of angry, violent skeleton men, but eventually was able to overcome the betrayal of my crew and take out LeChance's men. We headed down to confront LeChance, and he immediately started trying to murder me. Fighting LeChance was pretty easy, and unbeknownst to me, this would be the last time in this playthrough that I would have any kind of fun. I killed LeChance quite quickly, and thanks to the brutal cheeks clapping I provided, he realised that Bones is the love of his life and forgave him for cursing them to eternal life as skeletons. Before I could go to the next area, I had to retrieve this lady's glasses for her. This was my first time fighting the coiled enemies, and it was at this moment I realised that I was fucked. I genuinely could not beat this side quest, and I think it was because the best white spells didn't drop very often, so my spells were a really low level. I spent the next few hours getting my asshole resized in side quests, trying to get higher level white spells, until I stopped being a lobotomite and realised that I could just travel around vending machines and buy the white spells that I wanted. With higher level spells, I was able to get that woman her glasses. Then I met a coiled priestess who offered to help me get through the drowned abyss, and I was pretty traumatized after what had happened to me when fighting coiled enemies earlier, but I decided to trust her because I was desperate to get the fuck out of here. In terms of fun, there was no fun, only suffering, as I fought my way through the coiled enemies trying to get to the temple. Eventually, I couldn't take the beatings anymore and just ran for my life. I received guidance from a dead fish that I lit on fire, and it led me to the priestess where we were ambushed by her cunty sisters. Fighting her sisters was not fun, but it also wasn't too difficult since none of them were the kind of coiled that healed. It turned out that was just very unenjoyable foreplay for the worst fight of my entire life, Drill. Drill's first stage was a bit rough, but it wasn't the problem. It took a few tries, but I eventually got past it. The problem was his regenerating shield in his second stage and the 10 billion trillion coiled enemies that were constantly inside my asshole. Anytime I damaged his shield, he would always regenerate it back while I was waiting for my spells to cool down. And I was struggling so bad to stay alive because I couldn't kill the coiled enemies because then I'd have to wait even longer to attack Drill again, and in that time he would just regenerate even more of his shield. And the coiled enemies were constantly spawning in, so even if I did kill them, they'd just spawn back in about 30 seconds later. I attempted this for a lot of hours over multiple days, and there was only maybe 2 or 3 times where I was able to even deal a tiny bit of damage to his health bar. After 3 days of attempting this for hours per day and hardly even being able to touch his health, I decided that this was near enough impossible and spent some skill points to reduce the cooldown of my spells. After doing this, I did still struggle, but I eventually did manage to kill Drill and end this torture. Fighting him is the second hardest thing I've ever done, with the most difficult coming up later in this challenge. After I killed Drill, I went back to Brighthoof and respec'd my character so I wouldn't have any skill points spent anymore. I headed to Karnok's wall where I met the Wastard, who agreed to help me get over the wall and teach me how to dispel the Dragon Lord's barrier hexes if I helped him get his body back. Apart from this one part where I had to fight loads of dragons, this area of the game was uneventful. I had been playing for about 30 hours at this point, and I was still trying to emotionally recover from the drowned abyss, so I mostly ran past all the enemies here. I went into the Wastard fight extremely confident, and after what happened here, I came out of it a shell of my former self. It turns out the Wastard regenerates his shield a lot more than Drill does. He spawns in this little dragon thing that regenerates his shield, which you can destroy, but the issue is, once his shield is damaged, he just stands there and infinitely spawns the fucking thing in until his shield is full. So, as soon as I destroyed it, he spawned in a new one, and then my spells would be on cooldown, so he'd get his full shield back, and we repeated this cycle for so many hours. In the days that I was stuck on this fight, I was waking up in the morning, dreading playing this game and watching this cunt constantly regenerate his shield. Eventually, I had to accept that fighting this guy without spending any skill points was impossible. But even after I spent skill points, I still couldn't do it. I even tried spending all my hero points on spell cooldown, and I still couldn't do it, bro, I swear to God. I sat there for hours, seething with rage, just watching this smug bastard regenerate his shield until eventually I managed to fully chip away the shield and start damaging his health bar. For some reason, I was under the impression that once the shield was gone, that was it, gone. If you listen really closely, you can hear my heart shatter into a million little pieces when he starts regenerating the fucking thing back after I had just got rid of it. I finally, by some miracle, I have no idea how, managed to kill the bastard. The attempt that I did it on took an hour, and the relief that I felt when I did this, I swear, is better than if you didn't have a drink for like 3 days and were on the cusp of dying of thirst and then managed to get a drink of water. It was that good. The bastard showed me how to dispel the barrier hexes at the expense of my soul. But fuck it. Take my soul, my house, my life savings, take all of it, man. I just wanted to get to the Dragon Lord and finish this bitch. I returned to Brighthoof and reset my skill points and hero points. I headed to Osugo, which, thank fuck, was mostly full of skeletons, so I didn't do too much suffering here. And honestly, I mostly just ran past all the enemies that I didn't need to fight, since XP wasn't that important at this point. I met the Elder, who told me that I had to cleanse the wells of sin to get to the Dragon Lord. So I went and murdered all the sinners, just as the gods would have wanted, which wasn't too difficult since it was mostly just skeletons, but it did take a while since my damage wasn't great. I reached the Hall of Heroes, where the mutilated queen immediately started trying to kill me. This fight was easy, and I surprisingly dealt a good amount of damage to her. I did still have some moments of confusion where I just stood there and let myself get shocked to death or near death, but that's okay, because I put that monstrosity out of its misery. The Dragon Lord tried to convince me to join the dark side by telling me his sob story, but I've come this far and I am not about to turn back now. I headed to the pyramid and freed some souls from the crystals, but I had to punch them because spells don't work on the crystals, but shh, it's okay, I only used my bare fist. I freed the soul of the Dragon Lord's long lost love, Bernadette, for some reason, because it just makes the final fight a bit more difficult, and it was time. Shitty white spells in hand, unspent skill points in my back pocket. The moment I had been preparing for about a week had arrived, and it was time to face the Dragon Lord. The fight started out, and I actually dealt a pretty good amount of damage. He did have some moments where he regenerated his shield, which made my cheeks tighten up a bit, but he only does it like 2 or 3 times during the entire fight, so it wasn't that much of an issue. I breezed through his first stage, then during his second stage, Bernadette showed up, and her health was pretty chunky. But that didn't stop her from getting her cheeks spanked. With the power of God and anime on my side, I finished off the Dragon Lord. But once I got back the Sword of Souls, I let him live as he clearly isn't a threat since I beat him so easily with my shitty spells. I used the sword to bring back the queen and finally got anointed a knight, which now seems a little underwhelming considering I just saved the Wonderlands. So, can you beat Wonderlands using only white spells and no skill point? It's a struggle, but the white spell part is very much possible. But Drill and the Westard ruined the no skill points part. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like so it can get recommended and I can make the big bucks and stop being broke. And if you didn't like it, then just cyberbully me in the comments. Let me know what you want me to name my next character and subscribe, please. I'm desperate. Okay, thanks. Love you. Bye.